Welcome to IVF This, episode 101, People Pleasing. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to the first podcast of 2023. Well, I guess it's not the first podcast of 2023. I guess it's the first new podcast of 2023. We've done some re-releases the past few weeks, as you may have noticed, but we are ready to kick it into gear for 2023. And I'm really excited to get started and to share some of this new content with you and continue to provide support and help so that everyone going through infertility and IVF can find that there is a different way of doing this journey, a way that doesn't include beating yourself up, blaming, self-judgment, all of the suffering that we experience during this journey. Now, that is not to say that we won't experience pain. Pain is the cost of being human. Everyone who is living or has lived will or has experienced pain in their lives. What we're shooting for is eliminating the suffering, the added layer of pain that we inflict upon ourselves, thereby making this process just a little bit easier. So in the spirit of that, I'm asking you a favor. Most of you belong to some sort of IVF or infertility Facebook group or are some other forum or in a support group. Many of you know other people that are going through this as well. So my ask is that you share this podcast with just one person. It doesn't have to be a specific episode. If there is one that really resonates with you, maybe share that one. Or if someone is telling a story and you think, hey, maybe this would be a really good one for them, but share it just with one person, just one post on Facebook, share it with someone on Instagram or TikTok or in your support group or on a forum, share it with the doctor's office. Just a quick, hey, I found this podcast and it's been really helpful, so I wanted to share it with you and I hope it helps you or other people like you. Word of mouth has fed this podcast to where it is now. I mean, we are on the heels of 100,000 downloads, which sounds so insane when you think about it. So let's keep going, and I will be forever grateful for you sharing. All right, let's get into people pleasing. So people pleasing. There's a couple of things I want you to remember. First is that people pleasing is an aspect of perfectionism. Before the holiday break, I recorded several episodes pertaining to perfectionism and how many of the things that we do in pursuit of quote unquote perfection work against us in a lot of awful ways. And people pleasing is one of them. The second to note is that for some, people pleasing can be a trauma response. Understanding that we don't want to necessarily or unnecessarily pathologize everyone's behavior as a trauma response, because that's not really how it works, but people pleasing can be a trauma response. It's referred to as fawn. Some people know fight or flight. A lot of people know also freeze, but fawn or people pleasing is a fourth umbrella term for trauma responses. Okay, so just to keep those in mind. So let's talk about what people pleasing is. According to La Dictionary, a people pleaser is a person who has an emotional need to please others, often at the expense of his or her own desires. Most people, like everything else in life, can have aspects of people pleasing, and others are grade A 100% people pleasers, right? It's all a continuum. Okay. None of it is morally bad. You're not a horrible person if you're a people pleaser. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but more importantly, I'm going to talk about why we do it. There is a normal and natural desire for humans to be liked, or at least perceived positively, or have a positive regard about them, right? Where that can get tricky for us is when that need supersedes our own needs. People, especially women or those socialized to be women, are raised with this kind of unspoken contract that highly values, paying attention to other people's needs and feelings. We are taught that our job, our existence, is to be small, compliant, and to make sure everyone else around us is comfortable. We are taught to go along, taught to not make waves. So because we are conditioned this way, many of us fall into this trap of diving so deeply into the idea of being quote unquote in tune with others' needs that we subconsciously decide that everyone else's needs are more important or more pressing than our own. When we are focusing so much on pleasing other people, we don't usually do things that are pleasing to ourselves. Instead of trying to lean into ourselves or even learn about ourselves and attracting people that resonate with us, with our true self, and actually like us, we tend to worry about the opinions of the people that aren't really all that invested in knowing or understanding us. Women who speak out or stand in opposition are often labeled as bitchy, aggressive, whatever, right? And if you're a member of a marginalized group like Black women, Indigenous women, or other women of color, that label is amplified based on whatever labels or tropes that are associated with your particular race or ethnicity. Another way to think about people pleasing, I heard this from another coach. I actually can't remember right now who it was, but to suffice it to say, it is not my original definition, but that people pleasing is a pattern of thinking and behaviors that prioritizes other people's needs above our own. So it's like people pleasing should be rebranded to pleasing or trying to please literally anyone else but you. But that doesn't really roll off the tongue, but that's what it is. And if you think about it, in any given scenario, when you are in people-pleasing mode, someone is likely to be pleased, and it's almost certainly not going to be you. So if we're going to put this within the context of infertility, I think the most common thing that comes up is the stupid comments that people make to us. Now, I'm classifying them as stupid because they are often invasive, insensitive, off color, off-putting, and sometimes downright judgmental or cruel, or at least that's how it can feel to us in the moment. Now, I have a personal philosophy that I try not to interpret other people's actions or words as inherently negative in nature, but some can be intentionally hurtful, or just the person's carelessness with their words can be hurtful. Either way, maybe you're sharing with someone some of the challenges you're experiencing during your journey. Maybe it's that you're trying to conceive spontaneously, or that you're doing fertility treatments or a cycle and something like that. And the person responds with, "You should just relax," or something equally condescending or asinine. I think most of us want to say something. And it doesn't even have to be something rude or sarcastic or asinine or condescending back to them, right? Even if it's something like, "I know what you're trying to say is coming from a good place, but that phrase is so overused and is ultimately incredibly invalidating for a situation that is experienced by millions of people and couples around the world," right? But most of us won't say anything. Even when we desperately want to, we don't take that moment to call that person in and provide education on why what they're saying is hurtful, or even snap back at them for an insensitive comment, which is also human nature. That's okay. But we don't do this in part, whether it be consciously or unconsciously, because we don't want the other person to feel uncomfortable. This is a form of people pleasing. We are overvaluing that individual's comfort, and we are undervaluing our own. I cannot tell you how many times people would say things to me, especially those first few years into our journey before I kind of found my footing, where I wanted to say something with every fiber of my being, but I didn't. I didn't want to make those interactions awkward, but I, every time, without fail, felt awkward myself. Sometimes I would even feel frustrated with myself for not taking the opportunity to call that person in and to try and explain why asking questions or making comments about someone else's reproductive status is invasive and inappropriate and can be hurtful if you're not aware of what that person is going through. So again, it's prioritizing someone else's comfort over your own. Now, I will say that there are situations wherein it makes sense to kind of keep quiet and go with the flow, go along. Specifically, I'm talking about when our physical safety might be at risk. But those situations are considerably infrequent when we take into consideration all of the 1,000 other scenarios where our physical safety is not at risk, but rather what is at risk is someone else's perception of us, right? Someone else's comfort. Another example, and this came from a client I was recently working with, one of the things that we were talking about is that she really didn't have a whole lot of confidence in her clinic. She really liked her doctor. She had a lot of faith in her doctor. However, the clinic, from nursing down to the business office, and their follow through, their what we would call in healthcare the continuity of care, was far less than desirable. She felt like she really had to be the one to chase down appointment scheduling or to remind the business office to run her insurance, a lot of different things. And at first, she didn't think of it as a problem. She kind of thought of it as advocating for herself, which is vital, right? We're not discounting that. However, the trend never corrected itself, and she began to feel very resentful and frustrated. And that frustration started to spill over to her doctor and really influencing the way she saw her doctor and the organization as a whole, which is pretty understandable. So when we started to investigate what was really going on, and she started talking about how she knew she needed to say something to her doctor, but she didn't want to upset her doctor. She didn't want to get anyone in trouble. Not yet seeing that by not addressing the issue, she was creating undue stress and burden on herself since she was already working full-time and kind of managing the logistics of her own IVF care. And you might be thinking, well, that's obvious that she should have spoken out. But I guarantee you, when you're in that situation and all of the competing thoughts and feelings and all of the discomfort associated with what was happening, it can be really challenging to see the overall picture and to get lost in that people-pleasing mode. And actually, after we spoke and she wrote an email to her RE, her reproductive endocrinologist, and actually the clinic started to really look into their processes and procedures. And just that one email, my client saw an overall improvement in her patient experience. And I like to think, and I think she likes to think, that other patients experienced an improvement as well. But the thing that kept her from doing this for so long was the desire to not make waves, to not upset people, which is 1000% people-pleasing. This idea of going along is very specific to women's conditioning. How many of us have been somewhere, maybe it's at a doctor's appointment while we're on this subject, and the doctor proposes something that we have some hesitation with, or at least we have some questions that we would like answered, but we just go along rather than speaking up. It's incredibly common. So that's what people-pleasing is, and those couple of examples about how it can come up for you specific to infertility and IVF. But I'm not going to leave you hanging without helping you figure out a way to do something with this, okay? People-pleasing can be so ingrained for us that we don't even recognize the thoughts associated with it. We just feel this kind of general sense of anxiety or unease when faced with something, then when we make decisions just based on that emotion without even realizing that there was a thought behind it or that people-pleasing was a motivating factor. Now for the twist. You cannot, under any circumstance, control other person's thoughts, no matter what you do. We spend so much time and energy trying to control how people think and feel about us, but you have no control. It is a huge mental and emotional time suck for us, trying to control another person's perception of you, because what causes feelings? Thoughts. What causes your feelings? Your thoughts. What causes someone else's feelings? Their thoughts. Our thoughts are like an amalgamation of our conditioning, socialization, raising, education, belief system, and so much more. So there's no possible way for you to account for how someone else is going to think and feel when you take all of those things into consideration. What you can guarantee is that when you prioritize other people's comforts over your own, if that you will not make decisions or take actions based on what it is that you want and need and based on your own best interests, that's the guarantee. You cannot guarantee that by people-pleasing, people will actually be pleased with you. But what you can guarantee is that you will likely not be pleased with you, that you are not acting in your own best interest. So you are trading the certainty of having your own back and knowing that you're making the best decision for you for the possibility of potentially, maybe, pleasing someone else. The way out of people-pleasing is, 1, become aware of how often you're confronted with these uncomfortable feelings that compel you to seek the comfort of other people over yourself. And 2, to begin looking at your thinking. What are the thoughts that are behind your instinct to turn away from yourself in the interest of someone else's comfort? I want you to really interrogate the idea that someone else's beliefs and opinions are more important than your own. Now, some people might immediately say, well, they're not, which is true, but it's also a logical answer. Most people-pleasing isn't based in logic. It's based in emotion. It's the desire to make other people comfortable. So spend time really, really thinking about it. Now, I'm going to give you some journal prompts that can help you along with this kind of awakening or looking at what you do, right? This whole process. So the first one, describe a situation where you people-pleased, as you might tell a friend or therapist. What happened? Why did you act in opposition to what you actually wanted? Another one is, do I feel a need arising in me for this situation? What is it? Name it as simply as possible. Am I expecting another person to meet a need for me? Why and how? Am I trying to read another person's mind or hoping that someone will read mine? How so? All of these are aspects of people-pleasing that I don't think that we consider, and that's why I wanted to incorporate them in the journal prompts. So a couple more. What is the absolute truth about this situation? What could be proved in a court of law? What is not opinions, right? This is what I call the circumstance in the model that I use to coach. What are 3 to 5 thoughts I am thinking or sentences in my head that are swirling around about this situation? What emotions do these thoughts cause in my body? I want you to name the emotion and then describe the physical sensation that accompanies it. When I think these things and I feel these feelings, what comes of them? Meaning, what do you do with them? How do you react or act or not react or not act, right? What am I afraid of happening if I ask for what I want or need or deny someone a request? Where might this fear, what I fear would happen, right? Where might this fear come from? How can I release this other person from being the one I expect to meet this need? How can I release myself from being the one expected to meet this need, right? That works both ways. What are 3 ways I can help myself? Or to put it another way, what are 3 ways that I can meet my need for approval myself? Now, remember that these are very generic questions, so you can tailor them as you need to, as you want to, but my hope is that you can find some clarity around how and when you people please, and how you can begin to prioritize you in the smallest ways and in the bigger ways. And I always want you to prioritize yourself, not at the expense of someone else, because I know that that's what most of us think about when we think about, I'm going to make myself a priority. It's always at the end of the sentence is like, at the expense of someone else, right? But that's not the goal. That's not the idea. But the idea of prioritizing yourself so that you can be capable, you can be full, you can feel enough in order to pour into other things that you want to pour into, right? Not that things that you're told to pour into, but things that are your passion and your drive and your desire. And that is my hope for each and every one of you. So that is what I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can get something out of this. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.